Welcome in, Hokies fans, to this edition of the Tech Sideline Podcast. We record on Thursday, August 4th, and on today's episode, we got a little bit of everything. After a couple interview podcasts, we'll finally sit down and talk some football and recruiting news and begin looking ahead as we kick off the season in just under 1 month. It's all coming up on the Tech Sideline Podcast, which starts right now. We welcome you in whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or a variety of other platforms, or watching live or archived on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe while you're there and leave any comments in the chat for Chris and David while you're there. Here's a fun one. We've got a new presenting sponsor of Tech Sideline, First Bank and Trust Company, one of the nation's leading community banks. First Bank and Trust is a nationally ranked community-focused bank with over 30 locations throughout Virginia and Northeast Tennessee. With additional presence in North Carolina, they offer free checking with industry-leading mobile banking, financing solutions for personal, agriculture, business, commercial, and mortgage needs, and more. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. Well, it's certainly good to be back, joined alongside managing editor of TechSideline.com, David Cunningham, and lead analyst and columnist of Tech Sideline, Chris Coleman. Katie Adams with you here in the host chair. It's officially August. Finally, football will be played this month tonight, actually, right? There's an NFL game.
I think there's
preseason.
Jaguars, somebody.
Raiders.
Okay, so NFL.
I'm not going to watch.
College coming later.
I know some people will be watching. Yeah.
No Virginia Tech football this month. It's more of a Florida State, Duquesne. If that's your cup of tea, go
that's
for
not
it.
my cup of tea.
But it's exciting nonetheless. I feel like I was just watching Georgia win the national championship, and here we are again, preparing for another season, our last season of Coastal Chaos. David, how are you holding up?
I'm excited, and I think I was actually chatting with a friend earlier, who writes for a betting organization, and he was just getting my thoughts on the ACC as a whole. And I said, you know what? There are so many new coaches in the ACC. There are 4 in the Coastal. And there are so many good quarterbacks. Like, this is going to be, it might not be the highest quality of football, but it's going to be a fun quality of football this year.
Actually, just quarterbacks are so important, man, that the ACC could be a better league than people would think this year. That's a very important position. But yeah, like you said, like, getting back, it's kind of weird. Football is a unique sport. Like, you and I are soccer fans, and that season lasts 9 or 10 months. And baseball season lasts 6 months plus another month for the playoffs. And then, basketball and hockey, that they last over half the year. Football lasts like 3 months plus the bowls, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of tough being a football player because you actually only get to really play your sport for about a third of the year.
Yeah, and they spend the entire month of August going through fall camp.
Oh, which is horrible. Yeah.
So it's good to be back.
Yeah, I feel like this offseason was a little bit different too, because usually in the past, Virginia Tech hasn't been so good at basketball and baseball, and it's just been like, when is football season coming next? But now we had a treat this past offseason with good basketball and baseball season, so that's
and softball.
Always yes, and softball all around. We love it. But before we get into the meat of the episode, wanted to acknowledge the new set decor. We got some Tech Sideline helmets, one behind David and one behind myself if you're watching on YouTube. So graciously given to us by Clark Rulin. So shout out to him. Thank you so much for those. We got everything with the helmets,
they look really good,
and the new red shirt, license plate, the TSL headquarters.
It's the best set yet. We've had a lot of iterations of this set.
We have, I mean, it's sad.
I wouldn't change this one very much. I think it would.
Yeah, well,
besides the flashing light,
we had, and for so long we had the little basketball and the ACC championship confetti on there, but when we had Brent Pry on, we had to put the one of the TSL football helmets on, which rightfully so. It's football season.
That's right.
Well, before I take up any more of the time, let's jump into it. Fall camp started this week. Players reported Monday, August 1st, and they've now had 2 days of practice with a third coming later today. But following the practice yesterday, both of you had good things to say about the dynamic linebacker position this year, and you would hope that given Coach Pry's background, coaching linebackers and being a defensive coordinator, what can you share about some of the guys in that room and their involvement?
You know, David actually got to watch this, and he put a great video of it on Twitter as far as the linebackers versus the running backs. And, you know, I think there's really 4 linebackers that I think are really athletic guys who I think could do a really good job running with running backs in coverage. And we saw that yesterday. Tisdale, you know, you had
Jaden Keller.
Jenkins, Jaden Keller.
And Keely Lawson.
Keely Lawson. I think Keller is probably my favorite young linebacker in the program. I think he can do so much. He's going to play some this year at will. And I wonder if he will actually won't move to Mike next year.
When Dax leaves.
Yeah, when Dax leaves. Because Pry would prefer more athleticism at Mike than he currently has. So I do like some of the young linebackers in the program. You know, you've got a sophomore there in Jenkins, and then a couple of redshirt freshmen that I think have excellent athleticism. Lawson actually had an interception later in practice.
I think Hokies FB tweeted
they
it
did.
out. Yeah.
They did. So I think there's some solid young players there. At Will and Sam, I would not say that Mike has a solid young player in the depth chart.
It's kind of 3 veterans. It's Dax Hollyfield, Keyshawn Artis, and Dean Ferguson, who missed last season with an injury. Dean did
most of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but so Dax Hollyfield is back for his 5th or 6th season.
6th year, I believe.
And Keyshawn Artis, I believe, has a COVID year next year if he wants it. But like just in general, 3 much older guys, where the Sam is a new position and you're dragging a couple young guys in there, and Keontae Jenkins, Keely Lawson, and J.R. Walker's there too.
From different positions.
Yeah. And then Alan Tisdale, he's got a COVID year next year if he wants it, but Jaden Keller is behind him, and he's kind of, I would say, like you said, the rising star of this linebacker group. So it's going to be really interesting. I know it's something you've written about, the recruiting this year, recruiting linebackers. You got Asen Stevens and a couple other linebackers coming in, because there are a lot of older guys that are going to be departing the program, and soon it'll kind of be like Jaden Keller will probably be like the face of the linebacker room come next year or 2 years from now.
Not just that, but you know, Pry wants a distinct type of linebacker, I think, and he wants to fill that room with his type of linebacker sooner rather than later. And I think he's doing that at will with Asen Stevens. And, you know, he's targeted and got commitments from a couple of guys who I would project as a Sam right now also. Don't know about Mike yet, which is why I kind of think maybe next year Keller, if he shows that he's physical enough this year. We know he can run. We know he can cover. Now, when you're at the will spot on the short side of the field on the boundary, you have to play in a phone booth a little bit to a certain extent. You got to be really, really physical. Is he going to be able to be that physical that early in his career? But, you know, bright future there.
Coach Pry was honest in saying that he wasn't entirely pleased with the way that the first practice went, and I think that you can appreciate that coming from a coach. He said in the past that he's not going to sugarcoat anything, and he hasn't right off the bat. He mentioned that he wanted them to be more competitive, but what can y'all think of as something else that needs to be improved in the practices to come leading into the season?
I would say depth at certain positions. Yeah. I think some spots Tech has solid depth, but they don't at offensive tackle. Like they were playing walk-ons and natural offensive guards back in the spring at offensive tackle.
Yeah, I think they've worked on some of that this summer.
Yeah, Xavier Chaplin is a massive human being. I mean, he makes Silas Janzi look small to a certain extent. He's probably 6'6" or 6'7" and about 350 pounds. And he's playing left tackle right now, and I would be surprised if he didn't factor into the 2D.
I believe he was a third string.
They're going to start him off with the third group, of course, as a true freshman. But they have to improve that depth at offensive tackle because, you know, if the season started tomorrow and either Janzi or Parker Clements got hurt, like I don't know how much the offense could actually function if they had to bring in one of their current backup.
It'd probably be Bob Schick.
That's scary, because he's a guard.
Yeah. So yeah, it's like I believe he was getting reps with the twos at left tackle yesterday.
And it was right.
But that's the problem. I think the offensive line is kind of one of those areas where Tech has so many guards and it's helpful when you need guys to play center, but they've got Johnny Jordan at center, so they don't need another center necessarily right now.
Yeah, they got like three guys that could play center.
Yeah, and then they've got all these guards, and they've got so few guys that are experienced playing tackle. I think depth as a whole, and we see it like on the defensive line too, defensive end and tackle. We kind of know, okay, Josh Fuga, Norrell Pollard, Mario Kendricks, those are kind of going to be the three up front. I'm interested to see how much progress some of the young guys like Gunnar Givens makes, throughout the fall camp and so far this summer. But like we know Wilfred Panay is going to be up there, but I think as a whole, like Taiwan Garbutt's locked down one end spot, the other end spot's kind of open. You assume maybe Jalen Griffin, but that depth, as I've told many people, Tech, I think as a whole, the starting 22, it's a pretty good team. Once you get into that too deep, it becomes a little bit risky. And I think just building up the depth more, getting the young guys more acclimated to college, I think that is going to be crucial throughout fall camp.
You mentioned earlier those practice videos that you posted out and the emotion in Coach Pry's voice. It was certainly good to hear. Were there any players that you heard like stepping up as vocal leaders?
I don't.
They put us over on the sideline,
Okay.
So we're not close enough to the players to really hear what they're saying.
Yeah, but it's also I feel like that part of fall camp, like what we observed, it's so, I don't want to say close up, but they're drills. It's not like that. I think was a special occurrence where you're seeing at the same time there were wide receivers going up against DBs in the indoor.
Yeah, I was watching that.
And he was watching that while I was watching the running backs and linebackers. But in the end, it's all drills. It's not, it's kind of like the staff saying, okay, hey, do this. And it's not like they're energetic about it, but it's besides a little bit of chirping back and forth, they're not, it's not like they have to dictate what or step up as a leader and say, hey, you guys need to be doing this, because they got coaches there to tell them. That makes sense?
Yeah.
There's plenty of older players on this team, though.
Yeah.
I mean, Dax is obviously going to be a vocal guy.
Shamari Connor, who we talked to yesterday.
Yeah, I don't know how vocal he'll be.
Well,
yeah. On offense, you've got some older guys, too. You've got your Jansies. You've got your Johnny Jordans. Caleb Smith is a guy who I think, they took him down to Charlotte for a reason.
And he was well-spoken.
Yeah, he did a great job. And so, and I think he's a hard worker who came here as a walk-on and earned a scholarship. So people in that locker room will respect him. So I think he's a candidate for that too.
Okay. Lots of new faces on the team, whether it's freshmen or transfers. Someone that fits into a category of his own is Cole Beck. Chris, I know you were covering the team when he initially committed to Virginia Tech out of high school. Then he was a running back. Now he's a wide receiver. Thoughts on him?
Yeah, he came in and redshirted, and I believe he broke his collarbone his very first semester on campus.
That sounds right. Yeah, because he came in class of 2018, and then he redshirted, and then he was on the roster in 2019, I believe.
I don't know if he was actually on the roster in 2019, but he broke his collarbone at some point. Basically, all right, so you have to keep your expectations in check for Cole Beck. All right, so he has not played football, and he's not played in a football game in 5 years. And now you're asking him to play a position that he's never played before. Okay, that's very, very difficult to do. He's got a lot of speed, no question. I don't think he catches it naturally, as far as turning his body and then making a catch or catching it in traffic. I would not be comfortable throwing a slant to him over in the middle where he's got to put his hands up in the air and catch it with a lot of defenders around him. I feel like passes to the flat on the outside when nobody's around him, get him space, try to find some ways to maybe get him open deep where he's not in traffic. I feel like those are the ways. You can use Cole Beck because speed is an asset, but he's not going to be somebody who's going to come in here and be in the two deep at wide receiver and have the knowledge of the passing tree where he's able to go out there and, when you're a wide receiver, you could be running one of 4 different routes on a play, depending on how you read the defense. And Beck's not going to be able to do that after one preseason when he's never played receiver and he hasn't played football hadn't played in a football game in 5 years to begin with.
But I do think he'll be a good tool to utilize.
He can be, yeah, absolutely, and you can use him as a kickoff returner too. And let me say this, like he's done a great job, I think, in the weight room preparing for football season, because it's a big being in track shape and being in football shape. Having a track body and having a football body are two different things. I personally think he's made more progress in the weight room the last 3 or 4 months than a few of our past players. You know who I'm talking about, made in 4 years at Virginia Tech. Yeah. So I think he's done a great job getting himself ready, but I do think because of all those other factors, like you have to limit your expectations. I do think he's going to play a specialized role for Virginia Tech, but he's not going to be out there for 30, 40, 50 snaps in a game.
So lots of new additions, but unfortunately attrition is also inevitable in football. Feldarius Payne, the defensive end transfer from Nebraska, likely out for the season. You hate to lose anyone, but I think that we can still be excited about the defensive end room with guys like you said, Tywan Garbett, Eli Adams, Jalen Griffin, among others.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Payne was going to come in and certainly compete for a starting job. And if he wasn't the second defensive end, he would have been the third defensive end. He's an experienced guy. They were also probably going to slide him down to defensive tackle on 3rd and long in obvious passing situations to get some more quickness on the field as far as a pass rush goes. To me, that's Cole Nelson's is now the starter.
I was going to say Cole Nelson. You got CJ McCray in there. Those are probably the 4 or 5
There's
big
some
names.
young guys in there. Cole Nelson was the starter in the spring before he got hurt and missed the last 4 or 5 practices in the spring game. He was the starter opposite Garbett, and I think that will continue. You know, when I went down to Charlotte, I asked some of the players to name some young players in the program that are standing out to them more than anybody else, that have really good futures. And I always like asking players that question rather than saying, what do you think about this guy or what are you thinking about that guy? Because they're always going to give you positive answers. If they don't think somebody's good, they're not going to tell you, yeah, that guy stinks, right? They're going to be positive. So, but when you ask them, hey, name some guys that you think are going to be really good. Silas Janzi named CJ McCray and he named Cole Nelson. He's got to go up against those guys on a daily basis. And you know, Dax also named McCray. Yeah. Silas Janzi, who, you know, offensive tackle, he's used to blocking Cole Nelson. He said, Nelson is exceptionally strong and he's tough as nails. That came from veteran 60-year player Silas Janzi, who probably ought to know he knows what he's talking about by now. So I feel good about some young defensive ends in the program. And yes, you're right. Even with the loss of Payne, I don't think Tech has like a true sack master at that position, we'll say. And you know, Tech fans are used to, you know, in the 90s coming up where every year somebody had 10 or 12 or sometimes even like 18 sacks like Corey Moore. But I don't think Tech has had a defensive end get double-digit sacks since it's probably Darryl Tapp. Yeah. Yeah, so that doesn't happen anymore. But so I don't think like somebody's going to come out there and be like first team all ACC and get double-digit sacks. But I do think it'll be a solid group, though. Yeah. And I think it's a group that, considering, I think the most talented players, the most physically gifted players of that group are a couple of the youngest players. Guys. So I think that group's going to get better steadily over the next few years.
That's what I was going to add. So you've got Tywan Garbett, Jalen Griffin, and Eli Adams. Those are kind of the oldest guys in the room. Then you've got kind of the rest, and there's kind of a little bit of a gap because it's CJ McCray, Cole Nelson, Mateus Carroll, Jordan McDonald, and then the 2 freshmen, Burgos and Moisten. Mm-hmm. So there's a clear gap between the 3 oldest guys in the room that have kind of stuck around for a really long time and then the rest. And you're going to see probably Carroll, Nelson, and McCray kind of separate themselves. And obviously Nelson will get a lot of playing time and the other 2 probably will too. But for the future, it'll kind of give those other two or three young guys that have, you know, McDonald transferred or moved over from the position recently, I guess in the spring. So
you don't have to play guys before they're ready.
Yeah, they'll have time to develop and stuff. So I think as a whole, very young leaning room, but I think it's a pretty solid room. Payne would have added a lot of depth, but you know, that's football. Those are injuries.
We've talked a lot about the defense. I don't think that's criminal to say that the defense is going to be the shining spot of this team and compared to the offense. But like you said, you guys both went down to Charlotte and got to hear from guys like Caleb Smith and Silas Janzy, who are a part of the offense. What other guys on offense should we look for in this year?
I really like Malachi Thomas and what he did last year. I think he's a natural runner, and I think he's a good fit for the inside zone, which Virginia Tech will run a lot of this year. And you remember the 2 long runs he had against Syracuse last year. They were both those inside plays, and I just think he's got good vision. He doesn't have like elite speed like Lee Suggs, but his body build and his vision kind of remind me a bit of Lee Suggs. And I'm not saying he's going to be the next Lee Suggs, but I mean, for what he did as a true freshman was impressive. He's filled out a little bit more this year, and he'll continue to do so as his career progresses. But so to me, he's a guy that I think could surprise. He could be a sneaky pick for like 1,000-yard rusher this year. I think he's a good player.
Yeah, I would say. So we talked to Caleb Smith a lot, and the same duo or trio of Dwayne Lofton, Jalen Jones, and Dallin Wright. That's kind of been the trio that has gotten a lot of praised by Fuente staff and now praised by this staff. And Caleb Smith mentioned those guys. And I'm interested to see, Brent Pry did mention yesterday after practice that the wide receiver room has made some strides. He didn't say what the strides were, but he did say they've taken strides, and he did say Fontel Mines, a wide receiver coach, has been doing a good job of them. So I'm interested to see. We know that Caleb Smith and then Temple transfer Jaden Blue. We know those are going to be the 2 options, whether they're 1 or 2. But Tech is going to need Dwayne Lofton, Dallin Wright, Jalen Jones, those guys, Christian Moss, to step up. Tucker Holloway, Benji Gosnell, there's a lot of young guys in that room, but there are a couple guys that have been in the program for 2-ish, 3 years now. Those are the guys that you should be seeing, I would think, some development in now. And with a new offensive coordinator, new system, new wide receiver coach, you would think, and from what it sounds like, those guys are making strides. And I'm interested to see how much of an impact they can have this year, because it cannot just be Smith and Blue.
Besides strength and conditioning and things like that, my biggest pet peeve about this program has been wide receiver development. And I have seen them develop since the spring. I didn't think they were very good at all at the beginning of the spring, and I thought they were better at the end of the spring, and I thought they were better yesterday than they were at the end of the spring. So I'm not saying that they're going to go out there and dominate the league, but it's what I've always said. Sometimes people think there's no talent, but a lot of times it's just because your talent isn't being properly developed. And I think you've seen that the case with some players at Virginia Tech, that they were receivers and they didn't get better over the course of their careers. And, when I asked Caleb Smith down in Charlotte, well, first of all 3 players down in Charlotte, the first name they mentioned when I asked about young players was Lofton.
Yeah.
So first guy they mentioned, and then they said, but I think most Tech fans know who he is.
And he did have a couple big, he had a couple big catches in the Miami game last year.
Right. But, Caleb Smith mentioned Christian Moss.
Yeah.
Said he's tall, he's fast, and he's got good strength. He's just got to, learn how to play and everything like that. And sure enough, I saw him catch a deep ball for a touchdown yesterday, and I saw Dallin Wright catch a deep ball for a touchdown, and I saw Tucker Holloway get behind DJ Harvey and burn him for a touchdown, and the quarterbacks were putting the ball with the money on those deep passes.
I will say the quarterback said we're throwing the ball really well yesterday.
And I've said that since Jason Brown transferred in and Grant Wells transferred in. Like, if we can't make any plays down the field this year, it's not going to be the quarterback's fault, because they've got plenty of arm.
Yeah.
I think I'm encouraged by what I've seen as far as their development goes. And I'm not saying we're going to have a first team or even a second team All ACC player in there, but that group has gotten better collectively since the start of the spring. So that's 17 practices total, and I think they've made a lot of strides from practice 1 to practice 17.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing in year 1 for Brent Pry offensively, when you're still trying to build it and you're still trying to develop the young guys so they can be your future, because right now the building block is all of the old veterans that have stuck around that stuck around to help build up the culture for this season. Caleb Smith, Silas Janzi, some of those older guys, Jalen Holston, right? Well, you've got really good talent in the running back room like Malachi Thomas. Okay, but if defenses you're facing know you're going to run the ball every single time, it's not going to work, right? It needs to be a balance. And if you can get some balance out of Lofton, Wright, Moss, Jones, that help Caleb Smith and Jaden Blue. So it's, and you've also got a really strong tight end room. If it can be a balanced offense, I'm not necessarily saying they're going to be really good, but if it can just be a non-one dimensional where you don't have to run the ball every single time, I think that's going to go a long way, especially when it comes to development and being able to get guys on the field.
That kind of leads me to my next question. Obviously, lots more to come as fall camp continues and football media day is next week. David and Chris, I'm sure you'll both be there. But the ACC preseason poll and preseason team selections were announced last week. Virginia Tech picked to finish 5th in the Coastal, their lowest ranking since joining the conference. Also didn't have anyone selected on the All-ACC preseason team. Obviously, it is preseason, so you don't read into it too much. But does Virginia Tech have a chance to kind of flip the script and make a name for themselves, or is that just the reality with the new coach?
I think they can be a good team this year. I think depending on turnovers, injuries, whether they convert their red zone trips into touchdowns or field goals, things like that, like little things. I think they can go anywhere between 4-8 and 8-4. Yeah. Based on those, I mean, you look at last year's team. They were 2 plays away from going 4-8. They were 3 plays away from going 9-3. And so if everything had gone right for Virginia Tech football last year in all those close games, they would have gone 9-3. If everything had gone wrong, they would have gone 4-8. And I think you can say that for a lot of teams. I mean, the way the talent is stacked at the top of college football these days, we complain about parity because only a few teams have a chance to compete for a national title, and that's true enough. But I do think that makes things a little more even in the middle for everybody else. I think there are more teams like Virginia Tech that are close to being good and also close to being not so good. So that's why it's important to be good at the little things. That's why player development is so important. If our player development was just a little bit better, we could have gone 8-4 last year. I think just a little bit better. But I think you can make an argument, a strong argument for Virginia Tech finishing anywhere between 3rd and 5th in the Coastal Division. I think Miami's the clear-cut number 1. I can definitely see why people would pick Pitt number 2, but I even could take some issues with that because they lost their best quarterback since Dan Marino. Mm-hmm. They lost their best wide receiver since Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
And you're going to put them in the top 20? It just doesn't seem like Pitt is the type of program that reloads year by year after that.
And their recruiting isn't good either.
Right, so to speak. They're now
their player
development.
Their player development's awesome.
Yes.
Like people always our fans complain about Tech recruiting, and we almost always have a higher ranked recruiting class than Pitt. Yet they
and
beat
Wake
our
Forest,
brains
yes, they
in.
were both in the
right,
ACC.
Exactly, and because they develop players.
Reminder: Virginia Tech has to go to formerly Heinz Field this year.
At least it's not Heinz Field.
Yeah.
What is it?
I don't know.
How to pronounce
it's some long
it.
name, and we're going to call it Heinz Field for forever.
Yes, we are.
But no, I think the good thing is, and this kind of plays into Virginia Tech's hands. There are 3 programs that did not turn over head coaches in the Coastal: North Carolina, Pitt, and Georgia Tech. Somehow.
After this year, a different story.
Yes.
Georgia
Yeah.
Tech,
But so it's 4 first-year head coaches, right? Tony Elliott's kind of in the same situation as Brent Pry. He's still, trying to learn the ropes and get his program where he wants to be.
Let me hijack. So they had their big barbecue this past weekend at UVA for their recruiting.
Cav cookout,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yeah, guess how many recruits showed up?
I'm scared to ask.
1. They organized a whole barbecue for 1 recruit. Bet he felt special.
No.
Interesting.
That's funny. So there was this huge thread the other day. There's this Twitter message board geniuses, that Twitter account.
Yeah.
So they found a bunch of UVA posts from one of their boards and fans. They're really like, I'm not gonna say the fan base is turning on Tony Elliott, but the people who pay close attention to recruiting are really mad at Tony Elliott right now.
Wow. Anyway. you got Mike Elko at Duke, Mario Cristobal at Miami. All these head coaches are in the same spot. Cristobal has the advantage. One, it's Miami, but two, he's been a head coach many other places before. But I do think it's kind of an open Coastal division,
as always.
That's the last year of Coastal craziness.
Yeah, last year Coastal chaos. I mean, it usually is an open division, but like I picked Pitt just because they have the most guys returning and they didn't have a coaching turnover.
And you don't trust Miami.
And I don't trust Miami.
You're not falling for the trap this year, but I am. So.
You are?
But I do think that like. I think it'll come down to injuries.
Yeah.
Number one, turnovers and all the other little things will be right behind it. But like, Virginia Tech can stay healthy. Like the Hokies had so many guys injured last year, left and right. And then like it,
you think about it, James Mitchell had never gotten hurt. We probably would have won the West Virginia game.
You're right.
Other games.
That's the thing. James Mitchell got hurt in the second game of the season. Braxton Burmeister was hurt most of the season.
Yeah.
Half the offensive line was hurt half the year. So like, even Trey Turner, got hurt multiple times. I mean, you could go down the list and it's injury. That's just part of the game. Like he said earlier, if Parker Clemens or Silas Janzi gets hurt, that's going to be a long season. But if Tech can stay primarily healthy, and I'm curious to see, how that holds up, I think Tech can be pretty good. I think... Tech's not going to go out and steamroll anybody, and they're not going to go out and really surprise anybody, I don't think. But I do think that Brent Pry wants to just get back to hard-nosed football, and I do think it's possible, but, like, if you got, if you don't have much depth behind your starters and your starters get injured, there's only so many places you can go. And you asked about preseason players. Mm-hmm. The only preseason player I had on my ballot from Tech was Peter Moore. I was going to say Parker Romo. Peter Moore, the punter. And, I don't really think anybody else, I don't want to say didn't deserve it, but I think there's not necessarily any all-ACC caliber players that are better than the other players up for vote at other schools. And that's just kind of what is left in the program that Brent Pry is working with.
Yeah. No, you project improvement.
That is true, yes.
Who has the highest ceiling?
I think the right side of Virginia Tech's offensive line, Parker Clements, Caden Moore. Those guys started every game as true freshmen last year for what turned out to be a good offensive line. Yeah. And they played well. And, assuming they progress, which... that's been an issue with certain positions for Virginia Tech the last few years of players not developing. But that hasn't been a case with the offensive line. And, Joe Rudolph's going to be developing those guys, and he's got a great history at Wisconsin. So I think either one of those guys is a candidate to be on some all-ACC team at the end of the year. I think Malachi Thomas is a candidate. I think Dorian Strong is a good player.
Yeah.
I think Chapman's a good player. I'm really interested to see the safeties because Virginia Tech safeties have a habit over the last few years of starting their careers off strong and then either not progressing or flat out getting worse. And I think there's more talent than that. So if those guys start going in the right direction, like, you saw Nasir Peoples go out and dominate North Carolina last year, and then it was just a steady decline for him the rest of the season. I know he's more talented than that, though, because if he can play that well against those UNC receivers, then he can play well against anybody. So I want to see those guys start moving in the right direction. Like Tech went 6-6 last year, and that was with player development at approximately 50% of the positions not being good.
Yeah.
Let's say where player development is now at least decent at every position. I mean, they could get considerably better this year.
Well, and I think by the end of the season, when we're sitting down talking about it, I think Tech will probably have 2 or 3 at least all ACC guys, because I think they will reap the benefits of this new player development and how good it is. I mean, I wrote an entire feature on just Dwight Galt in the weight room and the culture and everything, and I wrote another one on the sports science. And Tech is investing so much into player development and that side of it that they're going to get better. But, of course, when everybody does these ballots, everybody's looking at last season and what you've done in the past, and it's not a projection based thing when it comes to players. It's more of a, okay, what have you done for me lately? And I'm not surprised that no Tech players got picked, just because that no Tech player really stood out last year.
No, at the same time, we're paying close attention to this and taking those lists seriously, but at the same time, Georgia Tech got a first place vote.
Yeah, that's also true.
I mean, who was voting?
That's
in
the
these
same
polls
person
these
that's probably the same person that
We
got.
don't know if they're even going to win a game this year.
That's probably the same person
crazy.
that got into SEC Media Days and gave a SEC title vote for Vanderbilt.
Yeah, so it's just, I don't know. So you look at some of those voting habits and you're like, I don't know. So wasn't like 9 different teams got a pick to win the ACC
like
this
that,
year?
yeah.
Which I don't quite
we
buy.
know you genuinely don't think
Yeah,
that.
I could genuinely vote for Clemson. I could genuinely vote for NC State. I could genuinely vote for Miami, maybe Pitt,
Wake Forest,
maybe Wake, but 4 to 5 teams, nine teams do not.
Yeah,
have a
I mean,
chance
like
to
I
win
think
this league.
Virginia got a vote.
Yeah, so like I don't even know who's doing these voting anymore and whether we should even take it seriously. I know you vote, but
I voted for NC State.
your votes were acceptable.
makes sense.
Your votes could make sense.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech.
And I think I
really
Georgia Tech,
have to come up
I'm pretty
with
sure I
something.
had Georgia Tech dead last.
Like I would yeah. I mean, I probably would too. Either them or Duke. But I would love to hear the reasoning behind picking Georgia Tech first place. I don't get
Doesn't
it.
make sense.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be a shorter episode, so we're going to keep going and not take a break. But I want to take a look at this schedule because it's not an easy schedule. The fact that the crossover this year is NC State at NC State, that doesn't help. West Virginia coming after losing up there, that doesn't help. And then ODU and Liberty are certainly not cupcake games. So this is a 2-part question. First question is, which game does Virginia Tech have the best chance to get a signature win in?
I guess it depends on what you consider
Define
a signature win. Anytime you win in Pittsburgh, I think is a signature win for Virginia Tech. Probably not a signature win for like as far as national media and things like that goes. I think people would pay attention if we beat NC State on the road on a Thursday night. I also consider that the least likely win of the year because I think NC State is really good. I don't think people are going to be fooled by North Carolina again this year. So if Virginia Tech wins that game, I don't think that'll fool anybody into thinking that's a signature win. So I don't know. Like NC State would be a signature win. I just don't think it's likely. Pitt, I don't know. Like,
let's look at West Virginia and Miami. Those are
I was
going to
say, I think,
Miami. Miami's
you think they're more likely to beat Miami than West Virginia?
No, it's just that I don't consider West Virginia a signature win.
Okay.
Like their coach is on the hot seat.
Very true.
Like did they even finish 500 last year?
They probably finished at 500.
At 500, yeah. I mean,
yeah. So my whole thing is I can't. Like if you go down the schedule and say signature wins, it's NC State. And that's like, like maybe you could maybe convince me Pitt and Miami
if they hold up their end of the stick.
Okay, if they hold,
we don't know.
Yeah, but so like right now, like I think Tech could beat Miami at home. I don't think that's too far fetched. I think Tech could beat West Virginia. I think NC State's the game Tech probably won't win. I think Tech beating Pitt at Pitt would be huge. Just because it's so
never do it.
Rare, yeah. But I think just
it's like I remember exactly where I was the last time Tech won in Pittsburgh.
I don't remember where I was.
That was like 2015 or 16, right?
It was Fuente's first year.
It was the lob to Isaiah Ford, Bucky Hodges, and Cam Phillips.
All 3 receivers had over 100 yards.
I do remember where I was. Exactly.
Yeah, I think just in general, it's like marquee wins with this schedule are going to be so tough to come by. But I do think there are a lot of chances for a lot of good, like quality wins because, like, assuming Phil Dracovic doesn't get hurt again, I think Boston College will be a 7 or 8 win team, right?
They have star power. Because like think
Zay
about
Flowers.
A quarterback and a wide receiver.
Yeah,
they have star
that's what
power.
I mean.
And they have experience.
I think some of these teams will be. I think the ACC will, like, assuming if Boston College doesn't get played with injuries, I think Boston College will be an all right team. That'd be a good win for Virginia Tech. Brent Pry's first ever win in Lane Stadium.
Oh heck yeah!
That'd be a great first win at night. I think some of these teams, like North Carolina, I'm not really sure how well to judge North Carolina because they've had so much talent in recent years.
They're capable
and haven't been able to do anything.
But when's the last time a Mac Brown coach team, whether at North Carolina or Texas, actually lived up to the hype?
Yeah, I will say, getting a win in Chapel Hill would be big. So I think.
I feel like it's not hard to win at Chapel Hill is the only thing.
Well,
but Virginia Tech fans love to beat North Carolina nonetheless.
Last time Tech went to Chapel Hill was the game Tech
the
barely.
COVID game where.
Oh, I don't even remember that.
We were playing Tisdale at Rover. We were
yeah. I forgot. I watched that.
So we don't count that.
I watched the COVID season. Remember? Yeah. Well, the last game I remember was the one in
the Hurricane game.
No,
2018.
It was the one in 2018.
The Ryan Willis fourth down scramble.
When North Carolina was about to score and they got down to the goal line
and fumbled,
and then I forget who it was punched the ball straight up in the air, and Tech grabbed it and then went down the field, and it was like Ryan Willis roll out, like little back screen to Dalton Keene in the end zone for the game
90-yard, 14-point swing.
Somehow I was there.
I was at that game.
Yeah, I just remember being mind-blown. But I do think, like, this is a solid first schedule for Brent Pry, and there are a lot of winnable games. You're not necessarily, it's not like you got to go to Miami. It's a very travel easy schedule.
Absolutely.
You get UVA at home. The NC State game, that's the big one, just because NC State should be a top 10 or top 15 team, you would think.
And it's a Thursday night game.
And it's a Thursday night game in Raleigh. But I think in general, there are a lot of good opportunities where if you went down the list and said, Virginia Tech wins this game, I'd be like, that's not a bad win,
Now, speaking of UNC, Katie lived in Chapel Hill this summer.
Did.
The saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Katie was the spy. Next summer, we're going to send David to Morgantown, probably to spend the summer. I'm just kidding, David. But no, how was Chapel Hill?
I loved it a lot. As much as I hate to say, I had a really great time in Chapel Hill. Going in, I thought that it was kind of like the same size as Blacksburg town-wise, but Chapel Hill's downtown scene versus Blacksburg's Main Street, I think Chapel Hill is like 3 times the size.
It's much bigger, yeah.
They have a lot more dining and restaurants and bars and shopping and things like that. So I loved it. The plan is to hopefully go there for grad school in sports administration. Nice. That is if I get in. So that was kind of a test run this summer to see if I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But on the other end of the stick, you would say that the game that you're least confident in winning is at NC State.
Yeah.
I think so.
Just because I think they're going to be the best team in the conference.
He thinks so. Yeah, they might be.
I think if they're not one, if they're not one, they're probably 2.
Yeah, they're very good. They're well coached.
Yeah, I think it's mostly just because I have questions about Clemson.
That's fair. When you lose both coordinators,
you don't know how good your quarterback's going to be.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
So what does this team need to do for it to be a successful season under year 1, Brent Pry?
I just want to see player development. If I see player development, I think we'll feel good about the number of wins Tech gets this year. I just want to get to the end of the season and say, okay, these players are better now than they were when Brent Pry took over. That's what we lost the last few years. Justin Fuente's last staff at Memphis was better than his last staff at Virginia Tech, because when he lost Holman Wiggins, he couldn't replace him. When he lost Galen Scott, he didn't replace him.
You just go down the list of guys.
Right. When he lost
Bud Foster,
of course he wasn't going to be able to replace Bud Foster to a certain extent.
And I think Justin Hamilton did fine.
Right. But I think Hamilton did fine as a defensive coordinator per se. I just don't know about the safety development and the linebacker development to that point. But his running backs coach at Memphis is the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M.
Yeah.
Right? Daryl Dickey. He had, obviously, Odom as a defensive coordinator. He's been a head coach in the SEC at Missouri. So Justin Fuente's last staff at Memphis was better than his last staff at Virginia Tech. So as he started losing those key pieces throughout his tenure, our player development, which was pretty good at first in his tenure, just dropped off a cliff. So I want to see it start going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think Virginia Tech has all the tools. Again, we've written about it, we've talked about it. The sports science, the nutrition, the weight room, the new student athlete performance center, all the tools are there. They just kind of have to put it all together. And I think that's a good point. I think on the field, a successful season is going to a bowl game. I honestly, I genuinely think, and it was interesting because I asked Caleb Smith, kind of what goals like for the team he had this year. He's like, I want to win a bowl game. He's like, Virginia Tech hasn't won a bowl game since the Beck Bowl against Arkansas.
Oh wow, that is
like he's like, I want to win a bowl game, and I do think that would get the program off on the right track. I think winning at least 6 games and getting to a bowl game is a good start, considering how empty the cupboard was when Brent Pry got here, and how there's not that much depth. If we can tell improvement in depth, like depth built up both throughout fall camp and once we get into the season, that guys like, you just go down the list of younger guys that will have an impact in the next couple of years, but are showing signs of it now. I think that will be good. But I think just in general, if you can show on the field, if you can get 6 or so wins, if you can go to a bowl game, if you can show kind of the trajectory on the field that your program is heading, because everybody just looks at wins and losses, I think that will help in terms of recruiting and making the program more attractive. And I think that goes a long way.
We'll talk a little recruiting, do some fan questions, and then we'll get out of here. The Richmond pipeline has been running strong right now. Fontaine Mines is doing a great job recruiting that area. It's kind of been a little bit of a hotbed for the Hokies as of late versus the 757, which you would hope it would be all those years in the past. Picked up 2 commits this past July from that area. Christian Williams, a wide receiver out of Collegiate, and Cameron Fleming, a cornerback out of Trinity. Thoughts on those guys?
Huge fan of Fleming personally. I think he's got the physical strength already to play right away. From a build standpoint, he reminds me of Armani Chapman. He could end up playing safety or corner in college, but I think you could make a stronger argument that Virginia Tech will end up signing the best 2 corners in the state between him and Braylon Johnson, and they're both from Richmond. Williams, I think he could play wide receiver or DB. He's got to add strength. That's his main thing. But he's a quality athlete from a good school in Richmond. I'm happy to see Virginia Tech doing well in Richmond. Richmond is of the 3 main areas in Virginia. Richmond is the area that I always see more Virginia Tech stickers in Richmond than I do the 757 or Nova. Like Nova, yes, I understand that there's Hokies in Nova, but it's so many people from the other part of the country living in Northern Virginia, right? It's really it's tough to identify with Northern Virginia because over half the people that live there aren't actually from there.
They just moved there for work.
They just moved there for work.
Yeah.
Richmond's different. Like if you're from Richmond, you're from Richmond for the most part.
I'm from Richmond.
You're from Richmond. And, the 757 is its own animal. But, I've always felt like Virginia Tech's best chance in the state of Virginia, where I feel like Virginia Tech can be sold the best in the state of Virginia, is with Richmond people. So I'm really happy to see the focus going there.
Yeah. Should we talk about Brent Pry on stage announcing Cameron Fleming's
Oh yeah, that's right.
Because that was hilarious.
Oh yeah.
Were you in the room?
I had the article written up in advance, right? Because
this always happens to you.
We knew Fleming was gonna commit to Tech, but we knew his press conference started at like 2 at his school, but we didn't.
Pry started at 2:15, and Fleming was gonna commit at 2.
Fleming's but his ceremony. Started
started.
So we didn't know whether the commitment was going to take place at 2:02 or 2:25, or depending on how long the ceremony took. So after like 15 minutes, I'm like, I'm just waiting for the announcement to be made so I can click submit on my article.
Yeah, publish. Yeah.
Never happened. Finally, I leave and I'm like, I'm just going to go listen to Pry talk. And of course, as soon as I sit down and Pry starts talking, that's what Fleming commits.
Yeah, and Brent Pry's up on stage. Oh, we just got another commit, and it's like probably 2:20, like 5 minutes into his press conference or something.
And this is fine because it's going to work out for Virginia Tech. Now, I'll tell you a similar story about one that I spent an hour on a Friday night one. Or no, it was a Saturday. It was a Saturday actually. It was this defensive tackle, and I don't even remember his name. He was committing on a radio show at a certain time. So I get online, get on the radio station. I I think it was like 6 or 7 o'clock on a Saturday night in the summer. I'm like, I got much better things to do than listen to what this 17-year-old thinks he's going to school. But anyway, so I do it anyway. And for the first 15 minutes, the radio host talks to his high school coach about the player. And then they take a break and they come back and they interview the player for like 30 minutes about recruiting. So here we are, it's like 7:45 and he still hasn't made an announcement. After there's like 2 or 3 commercial breaks, finally they come back like after like an hour or a little more, he makes his announcement. So I'm sitting there waiting and finally he announces.
He didn't even go.
Oh, and in early December, he got a Florida offer and decommitted and signed with Florida. And I'm like, what a waste of a perfectly good Saturday summer night.
You wasted like an hour.
Yeah.
No, that one worked out. And it was funny because it got, all of the national media that was there got aroused from national media.
That wasn't planned, by the way. But
I don't know. We asked Brent Pry, and Brent Pry, he kind of had a smirk on his face.
Did he really? I see. I think it's tough from Fleming's perspective to know exactly.
My guess is when he walked up on stage, he hadn't gotten the commitment yet, and he said, "All right, text me, and then I will make I will make a scene." Yeah, because he definityour knew, they knew the
times were going to coincide to a certain extent.
But anyway, it was a show. And to your point, to your original question, no, Virginia Tech has done a pretty good job on the recruiting trail so far. There's 16 commitments now, 17?
16 or 17, I think.
17, and I think about half of them are from Virginia. So it's a good balance.
All right, we'll get into a couple fan questions and then we'll get out of here. 2-part question from Wayne Kent. First, is Taj Bullock going to be used this season?
That's a good question. And I've always been against in the past. Like, Virginia Tech's had similar quarterbacks in the past for the most part. It's like, people are like, are we going to play Quincy Patterson? And I'm like, well, I mean, Hendon Hooker can run the exact same play, and he's faster. It's not as big, but he's even faster. So there's no point really in bringing in Quincy Patterson for one play when Hendon Hooker can probably do the same thing except do it better. When you have different style quarterbacks, like Bullock is a better runner than the 2 guys that are ahead of him. He's certainly a better runner than Brown. So I could see a situation this year where he could potentially be used in some sort of a package because he's so different from the 2 guys that are ahead of him. So I don't think it's impossible, but Pry doesn't seem like the type that he seems like a more straightforward.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to sit there and rotate quarterbacks. I think he's just like, I got my guy. We'll work with it.
Yeah,
maybe we'll see Cole Beck at quarterback. Who knows?
He didn't do it at all in high school that I'm aware of. All those games that I spent watching him at Blacksburg High School. But Wayne Kent also says, will we get another iconic David Cunningham picture at ODU this year? Do you plan to make the trip, David?
Oh, yeah. No,
that is a great picture.
I'll be there. Especially because I can go home on like Wednesday and spend the night at my house and see my parents and everything.
For those wondering, there is a picture of David. It's a television picture from the game.
It's it's an unsportsmanlike conduct photo.
Was it on Virginia Tech?
It was on unsportsmanlike conduct Virginia Tech, and the camera is right on David. Yeah. So the screenshot is.
So my guess is I don't know. Shout out my friend David Case. He went to Blacksburg High School. Yeah. He took the photo, and of course it's probably like 4th quarter. I'm not paying
because you're down on the sideline.
I was down on the sideline because ODU's field is so small, or was before they renovated it, that they did not have enough room. So they put me on the sideline, and so I'm a sophomore or a sophomore, I think. Yeah, and my guess is it was the Trayvon Hill unsportsmanlike conduct, but I don't remember.
You don't remember which one?
I don't remember because I didn't know it happened until I got a couple texts and people were tweeting at me yo, unsportsmanlike conduct. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. I didn't even know it happened. That I was on camera. My guess is they were panning to the sideline, but
yeah, probably.
But yes, hopefully, I don't know where I'll be, but we'll try to recreate it. We'll see.
Hopefully an unsportsmanlike conduct on ODU.
On ODU,
please. Yeah. For the love of God. Michael Moore says, what areas on offense and defense do you see improving the most this year?
Well, I would say wide receiver. Just
because
they were going down. It was the development was such a flat line
Yes.
Maybe even down to a certain extent with a few guys here and there, but like development had flatlined. So even marginal improvement is in comparison a big improvement in my opinion.
Yeah.
So to me, my answer on offense is wide receiver. Defense, I would actually say probably safety, because it's kind of a similar thing at safety. I think it's like players were actually in some cases regressing at safety, and so even if there's just marginal improvement, that's actually a big improvement when you compare the two.
Yeah, I think I might go linebacker defense.
That would have been my
Brent. Brent Pry's a linebacker guy.
Yeah.
And it was funny because in the if you go back and watch the video I tweeted yesterday, Brent Pry's getting animated, and somebody asked him afterwards, was that you being a linebackers coach again? And he was like, a little bit. I kind of slipped back into that. But I think you got to remember, he's going to be calling the plays for the most part this year. He's going to be kind of showing Chris Marv the ropes a little bit. But I also think that, Chris Marv knows what he's doing in terms of developing linebackers. I'm really curious to see, especially with the Sam linebacker and with Sean Quinn, Keontae Jenkins, J.R. Walker, Key Lawson. Those are three guys that can make a ton of strides, but they've never played the position before. So it's not like they've, have prior knowledge of it. So they're kind of going in blind, or at least they were when they made the transition positionally in the spring. So I think that position will develop a lot, especially you might see with young guys like Jaden Keller. Who knows?
There will certainly be lots more to talk about next week as practices continue, but that's going to do it here on episode 247 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Thanks, as always, to the crew, Chris Coleman, lead analyst and columnist. You can follow him on Twitter at Chris Coleman TSL. David Cunningham, managing editor of TechSideline.com. He's at The Real D Cunna on Twitter. Myself, I'm Katie Six Adams on Twitter. Nick Brown in his new role producing behind the scenes. Thank you, Nick. Signing off on episode 247 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. I'm Katie Adams. We'll see you next time.